That was Afrobeats Worship. Bless the Lord. You're on 94.9. It is 14 minutes past 4. And it's Tuesday afternoon, so that means Creation Ministries International. And today we are blessed to have Dr. Taz Walker on the line from Queensland today. And Dr. Taz, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, and it's good to hear your voice, Mick. It's been a while.
It's awesome to hear your voice as well, Dr. Taz. Now, Dr. Taz, I have to say today we don't have a phone line, so there won't be any questions coming in, simply because the phone line has issues. So, we can't expect any sort of, text messages coming through, but that's okay. There's a few things that I think we can certainly talk about. Let's start with Creation Ministries has their own website, creation.com.
Creation.com, that's right. There are thousands and thousands of articles on there. And Creation Ministries put up stuff for people, it'll be helpful for them. So they have to do a search, but for people at school, people at university, people with children, anything like that, they can find information that they find will be very helpful to them in life.
Yep. Now, I've done a little bit of a count. 15,687 articles on creation.com and 949 videos. How about that?
Yeah, that is good. That is really good. And we get so many people contacting and coming in. And we have people that say, look, they found the site, they found creation.com, and they said they just sort of binge read it, just day after day after day after day, and it totally turned them around. They just were so glad about finding the information. So that's the way we do it.
Absolutely. Now, I know with a lot of the stuff on creation.com, answers to some of those burning questions that, friends and family, as soon as they find out you're a Christian, they quite often hit you with those questions, particularly the really curly ones. It's amazing how they know so little about the Bible, yet they know the really curly questions.
That's right. And so that's one of the things that Creation Ministries does, because, when people talking to a friend, they can then type the question in the search box on creation.com and they'll come up with answers to it. So they can say, look, I really don't know the answer to that question, but look, I can find out for you if you like. And so that keeps the conversation going, which is very helpful. Yeah, and so that's why we do it. And there's hundreds of those sorts of questions, but that's understandable. We only ever hear about evolution really in our culture, about how it all happened, and that's science, and it's it's all true. That's what they say. Yeah. And so when these things come up, the questions are like, how can there be a good God if there's so many bad things in the world? That's one of the questions.
Yep,
and another one is, if there was just one man at the beginning and they had children, then they would have had to. Where did they get their wives from and their husbands from?
Yep.
So that's another question. And so they really puzzle people, and sadly, even in churches and that, people don't get answers to these things. So that's why the website is so valuable for people and so much of a help to people. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, one question that you may have heard before, and everybody out there listening may have heard something along these lines, but that is, if we're meant to be, designed by the greatest designer ever, how come some parts of us are really not designed well? Now, let's take, for example, the eye, the human eye, our retina. Apparently, it's a bad design. Is that right, Dr. Taz?
Well, if you listen to Richard Dawkins, people may not know him these days, but some prominent atheists, that's one of the things that they say. They say things like, if there is a God, he's a terrible designer. No engineer would ever design an eye like that.
Yep.
And so they go on and like that. And it's very interesting because the retina, which is the light-sensitive part of our eye, it's at the back of our eyeball, and the light is focused onto the retina. The retina is sort of, a lot of people would say it's back to front, in that the light-sensitive cells are not on the surface of the retina, but they're at the back of it. which
means they get blocked, wouldn't they?
That's right. It seems like that they would get blocked by all the nerves and that which is sitting in front of them, and people would think that's a terrible design. Why would anybody design it like that? And yet, when we read a newspaper or when we look out at the landscape, our eyes work perfectly well. How is that? And so, in front of the retina, there's all the nerves on top of it, and there's blood vessels going across the top of it. And you can actually, if you move your fingers in a certain way, it's a bit hard to describe over the radio, but if you move your fingers in a certain way, you can actually see the shadows of the blood vessels sitting on top of your retina, and yet we can see beautifully and amazingly well. And so that's it's pointed out as being a bad design, but when we're using it, it's actually a good design. But our eyes get old, they get to a certain point where you have to wear glasses, and then sometimes people have the retina separate, and then people might get blood pressure, get fluid pressure in their eyes and those sorts of things. And so there's a real mixture in our world of amazing design in the eye, and yet there's this sort of bad stuff. We live in a world which seems to be broken. And that really is, and the Bible explains that, how God created a beautiful and amazing world at the beginning, and yet it was the first man and the first woman disobeyed the Creator. They ate the fruit they were commanded not to eat, and as a consequence, we live in a world which is under a curse and which is broken. And so that's really the story of the Bible. Actually, is about how the Creator has been working and what He's done to fix it. And death is part of that. The fact that we get sick and get old and we die, that's part of the broken world, and nobody likes it. It's not very nice at all. And yet there's the promise of life, because the Son of God, Jesus Christ, rose from the dead and conquered death. So there's a whole, with the world in which we live is basically been transformed, or there's hope for us because of what the Bible talks about as the gospel, the good news of Jesus. So that's a little bit away from the human eye, isn't it? But certainly it's connected. The questions are connected, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, particularly when we realise, most of us have had fairly good eyesight when we're young. And, of course, as you get older, your eyes tend to slowly wear out. Well, we can't blame God for that because we are wearing out. That's because of sin way back when. And
that's right.
Of course, over the thousands of years since the first man was put on earth, humans have been breaking down. Everything seems to break down over time, and that's because of sin. I mean, look at our DNA. So many things that humans used to last for thousands of years, and we only last for like 80 years now.
That's right. And then sort of life becomes a little bit of a challenge for people after that, doesn't it?
Yes.
So there's an article on creation.com about this inverted retina. It's inverted is in inverted commas because it's not really inverted. It's the way it was designed. And it's by a medical doctor, Dr. Peter Gurney, and he wrote this article for the In-Depth Journal of Creation, and so which is an academic journal, and even though it's academic, it's still this particular article is easy to understand. And so he talks about how the retina is inverted, and he gives the reasons why. And one of the big reasons is to protect the light-sensitive cells, which are at the back, behind, all the stuff that's sitting on top of them, to protect them from the light, which would produce heat. And particularly when you focus with the lens and you focus onto the retina, the heat would cause a problem for these light-sensitive cells. And so what happens is there's actually some cooling mechanism at right at the back of these cells. The cells are in front of them, but at the back of the cells there's a very blood-rich layer which takes the heat away from the cells, the light-sensitive cells, and it protects them. And so that's, it's an optimal design. And so when people say it's a bad design, or what that really says is that they don't understand all the factors that have been taken into account and why it is the way it is. And so it's really an amazing thing, this retina, the way it's designed.
Absolutely, particularly when you consider, those the nerves and everything else are actually cutting the light down. All you really have to do is open your eyes and have a look at how clear things look, and you can see that it's been an intelligent designer has designed our eyes to see as well as we do, and of course
as well as we do.
Yeah, and we're designed to sleep through those nighttime hours. Well, in most cases, normally, and in which case, we have very much daytime eyes, and there are animals out there that have nighttime eyes, and their lives are nocturnal. They live at night. We live during the day.
That's right.
So our eyes are perfectly designed for that time that we're designed to live, and we even get told how many hours a night we're meant to sleep, and it just works perfectly.
Just works perfectly. That is exactly right. And so it's this so-called inverted retina. It's called the vertebrate. It's the vertebrate inverted retina. And so the vertebrate meaning animals which have got a backbone, and they basically live on the land. Things like possums and sheep and cattle and all those sorts of things. But there are other animals which are not vertebrates, which have an eye in which the retina is at the front, and that's the octopus. And the octopus, of course, lives under the water, and so it doesn't have the same issue as regarding potential damage to its light-sensitive cells that we have, being above the water. And so it's interesting, and that's another thing, is that the idea of evolution is that the eyes evolved, and nobody can explain how that happened, but the vertebrate eye is one eye that has evolved, and its vision is absolutely excellent. Hawks have got these vertebrate eyes, and you talk about a hawk eye, which is very, very good, and so the vertebrate eye, which is supposedly badly designed, is actually excellent vision. And then the octopus is different. It's different design. And so one could not have evolved into the other. They must have evolved separately if they evolved, which makes the problem, doubly ridiculous. Yep. And so it points to the fact that there is a creator God, all-powerful, all-wise, and an excellent engineer, able to design it all, and not only design it, but to manufacture it, and we're the beneficiaries of that.
Absolutely. You are on 94.9. It is 28 minutes past 4. We've got Apollo Ltd up next with Redemption Song. And we'll come back to Dr. Taz after the weather and traffic and a couple of songs. It was seventh time down with the 99. You're on 94.9. It is 22 minutes to 5, and we have Dr. Taz Walker on the line from Creation Ministries International. And Dr. Taz has been talking to me this afternoon about something that quite often people say, parts of human body are a bad design, or some things that are created by God are bad design. Why would he create that bad design? And one of those things that we've heard about in the past is, our retina. Why does our retina have these sort of photoreceptors that are covered by all these other things like nerve endings and those sort of things? Isn't that a bad design? It's not letting the light through properly. And well, Dr. Taz has been telling us that that's actually not the case. Those things are actually there to block the light. In a way, I guess it's so as our retinas don't get burnt. Would that be right, Dr. Taz?
That's right. It's right. That's so that our photoreceptors, which are the light-sensitive cells, so that they don't get damaged. And so it has to go through all the nerves, which the light-sensitive cells, the nerves from them, sit in front of the cells in the path of the light. So there's this retina is designed like that, and that raises another issue. Is we've got all the nerve cells in front of the light receptors. So how are you going to get them back to where the nerves, the light information is going to be processed?
Yeah.
So there has to be a hole in the retina, so that all the sort of all the wiring goes through this hole, and it goes back through that hole, and then it goes off to the brain, and all the information's processed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very interesting. I remember when I first learned about it when I was, a boy. I was just astounded. And so it's actually called the blind spot. There's a spot in our eyes which has got this hole, and so the rest of the retina can see everything, but the blind spot can't. But so there's a blind spot in each eye, and it's sort of not in the middle. It's slightly off center, towards the outside of each eye, towards the outside of the body. And so the nerve cells go through there. And the amazing thing is that the brain compensates for that. And so when we look at the world, we don't see any bit that's missing. But you can actually see where it is. And this is something that I found very interesting. On a piece of blank paper, I don't know if you've done this, you put a dot on a piece of paper, and then about away from it, about 4 inches or about 9 or 10 centimeters, you put a cross on it. So you've got a dot and a cross separated, spaced apart. And you hold these in front of your eye, and you just put it in, and you shut, say, the right eye, and you look at the cross with the left eye, and then you move the paper in and out, and eventually you get to a spot where you're looking at the cross, and the dot disappears, and it's quite a very how would you say, challenging, interesting experience to see just how our eyes work, and it's something that you'd never notice unless somebody gave you that little experiment to do.
Well, I'm trying it right now, Dr. Taz, and I can tell you that my glasses are blurry. They're dirty.
They're dirty. Yeah, you haven't done that before.
No, I'm trying it right now, but I don't think I've got the cross and the dot at the right distance apart.
Oh, they just have to be about the distance between our eyes, which is that's.
I've only got a centimetre. See, there you go.
There's got to be the distance, sort of the distance between our eyes. You put the dot on that and the cross on the other side, and so you hold it up and you shut your right eye, for example, which is in front of the cross, and you look at the cross with your left eye, and then you just move the paper in and out, and you can see the dot, and then suddenly it disappears. And
yes, it just did that for me. Yes, it did. Wow, I got it the right distance apart, and it did. It completely disappeared. Wow,
and it's sort of thing. Incredible, and something you've never known before, and that's called the blind spot. And we never notice it because the whole programming and the data processing part of our brain, and the way the eye is wired, is such that it produces perfect vision, and it compensates for all these things.
I guess when you've got both eyes open, you won't get that blind spot, but as soon as you start doing one and the other, then all of a sudden it becomes noticeable. Yeah.
It's incredible. And there's another thing about the eye as well, is that on the front of the retina, it's got all the blood vessels which provide the blood and the energy and the oxygen to the retina, and they're sitting on front of the retina.
Yeah.
And so there's blood vessel. So this is again not an easy thing to do, but what happens is our eye just wriggles. It just quivers a little bit. When somebody's alive and alert, you don't notice it, but their eye is just shaking a little bit. And by shaking, it actually is able to detect these blood vessels and compensate for them. And so you don't actually see the blood vessels.
Wow.
But you can see it if you put a hole in a piece of paper, a little hole like the size of a bit bigger than a pinhole, and you look at a plain wall, and you hold this hole in front of your eye, on the piece of paper. I suppose it needs to be about, say, a millimetre across or something. Mm-hmm. And when you look through the hole at the wall, you can see the plain wall. But when you just shake the paper just very slightly, you will see there'll be these shadows will appear, and that's the blood vessels which are are on the wall, but you don't normally see them because you've got two eyes and they compensate for each other.
Yeah, of course.
So now, it's amazing design.
Yeah, when I look at my computer screen right now, I can see every little line perfectly and clearly, and you sort of think, wow, my eyes are working perfectly well. And for, Dawkins to say it's a design fault, you have to question the fault there because they seem to be working all right.
And that's why I think it's important. Like, people hear this, there's a guy, P.T. Barnum, he did a circus display, and he said something like, there's a sucker born every minute, he says, because people grow up and they've not heard, these arguments about badly designed eyes. And when they first hear it, it really rattles them because, it's not something they've heard before. And so that's why it's so, we have the information available. And that's why across Rima FM, by letting people know this, they're sort of confident. They're no longer rattled by it. You can't fool somebody that's informed.
Yeah. I've got to say, I'm looking at the pictures as well through the creation.com site. And having the images there helps. I'm a very visual learner. So the way you explain things was cool, and I love doing those little experiments as well. And it just makes so much sense. You can see why someone might say that, but then when you go back to reading and looking at pictures and stuff, you sort of think, well, hang on. Whilst you might say it's a bad design, there's no bad design here because I can read everything perfectly. I can see all the pictures perfectly. It's a very intelligent designer. But I think one thing that really jumped out at me today is you're telling me that we've got very different eyes to an octopus. And, considering everything on Earth was meant to have come from the same one-celled thing initially, why do we have completely differently designed eyes?
That's right. You'd have to go back to school. They couldn't have evolved from the same eye. So they had to have evolved separately at least twice. But there's more than two different sorts of eyes. And so you've got different eyes in insects, and you know what I mean? They've got a sort of multi-lens. They've got multiple lenses for their eyes. And so it's amazing how many different eyes there are. And that's the way God made it. And when you look at it, there's a song, I don't know if, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. Yeah. And so the amazing creation. And then it says, He gave us eyes to see them. And He gave us lips to tell, which I thought that's a really, really nice little verse. We would not appreciate creation as much as if we didn't have sight. We just would not know, would we? Absolutely. But we have got sight. It's so glorious, yeah.
Yep. Well, Dr. Taz, thank you so much. We're at the end of another awesome week, and you've really taught me something. It was interesting learning all about the eye.
You're pretty knowledgeable. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, very, very much intelligent design making that. So thank you. It is 12 minutes to 5. You're on 94.9. We've got Toby Mack up next with Nothing Sweeter.